Hello and welcome to TotD Extra. On this episode, we're going to focus in on what was, in the end, a very quiet January transfer window for United. We'll ask the question why that was the case, whether it was the right thing with, of course, Champions League football now at stake in the remainder of this season. And we'll also take a look ahead to the summer to see exactly what will be on Manchester United's agenda then, which promises to be a little bit more busy than this past month has been. We've got Critch with us, we've got Carl, we've got Andy. How are we doing, lads? We okay?
Good. Relieved that it's over, even though nothing really happened at the same time. But I feel like there was enough happening outside of the transfer market at this club that we were given a bit of good grace as journalists on this side, not to have to be running right up until the deadline, as usual.
Yeah, the major outgoing and incoming of January was Ruben Amorim leaving and Michael Carrick coming in, wasn't it, to be fair? So in that regard, it wasn't a completely quiet January for United, just on the transfer front. Before we get into the conversation, I've sort of outlined it a little bit. Let's hear from Laurie Whitwell. He's missing us. He wants to be part of the podcast again, even though he is supposed to be on paternity leave. But anyway, he's sent us this message just outlining this episode, as he does.
Hi guys, yes, Manchester United did not do any business on deadline day, which made for a refreshing change. From a journalistic point of view, meant that we weren't up late into the evening trying to figure out if they were going to make any last-minute additions. But it does mean that they finished the window in January without any new additions, which, people can certainly question, because when you've got Champions League there as a carrot, do you want to actually enhance the squad, give Michael Carrick some extra options to win these games that are going to be now until the end of the season, to make sure that United can actually qualify for that lucrative competition? Because for the sake of, a certain number of millions for bringing in a new player, if they enhance the team and make it so that United do qualify for the Champions League, then it's money well spent, right? But I think United took a long-term view and felt that actually the players that they wanted to sign would only be available in the summer. So you're looking at midfield, right, aren't you, where Casemiro has been brilliant in recent weeks. So does that actually mean that there's less imperative for United to go out and buy a midfielder? I think we've seen a certain drop-off when Manuel Ugarte's come on, but can they actually bring another midfielder in? And then would Ugarte's value in the summer, say they were going to try and sell him, would that be hit? I certainly think that Elliot Anderson, top of the list, would Nottingham Forest sell him in January? Clearly no. Carlos Belieber, some talks around him with Brighton, but again, I think that would be a difficult one to execute. Same with Adam Wharton at Crystal Palace. So I think United have decided, let's go with the squad that we've got. Let's see if it can do the job. We think it can because of the recent results, the recent performances. And there's only a certain number of games left, right? So it's one game a week. Are you going to get enough opportunities for any new signing that comes in to actually go into the team and make a difference? We've seen Kobbie Mainoo come into the team and do well. So I think from a United point of view, they've felt that this is the squad that they want to finish the season with. Now, again, we'll see at the end of the season whether that was the right call or not. They obviously did try for Antoine Semenyo earlier in the window when Ruben Amorim was still in charge, and it's interesting now to reflect on the fact that he was telling Semenyo, United were telling Semenyo that he would be selected as a left winger because in a 4-2-3-1 system now, particularly with Patrick Dorgu being out, Matheus Cunha can play there, yes, but Semenyo, you could see how he would fit into that system perfectly. But ultimately, Semenyo wanted to join Manchester City, and we've detailed on The Athletic about why that might be, additionally to the fact of, finances or the opportunity to win the title in his first season. But the only other player that United did try and sign this window permanently, Yissa Alau, who was a 17-year-old left-back for Sheffield Wednesday, actually in competition for that spot with Harry Maguire, who was on loan from United, so an interesting dynamic there. United looked at him as a youth signing, but ultimately the money, I think, got too much for what they were prepared to do. So it's sort of like £500,000 initial fee is what we believe, but then the add-ons go up quite significantly, over £1 million. So Chelsea have gone and done that deal. So it was United versus Chelsea. Ultimately, Chelsea got it done. But I think it does show that United will want to try and attack the youth market in years to come. They've already done this with a number of cases since Ineos have come in. So, let's see how they progress with that kind of signing in future. But, anyway, I'll leave it to you guys. Have a great podcast. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Laurie. I think we can all just go home now. He's done the entire thing for us. Quite nice in a way, though, to scene set. So thank you for sending that in, because there are different aspects to this conversation. But Andy, I think we start with the question, why has January been so quiet, in your opinion?
It was always going to be. Manchester United pushed the boat out ahead of the season. I think the Benjamin Šeško signing was a surprise that Manchester United were able to do that, took the spending to 200 million. I think the club felt that their top targets would not be attainable in January. The exception to that was Antoine Semenyo, which we covered on this podcast. He made the wrong decision to move to a different football club, so that didn't happen. I think there are financial restrictions. This is because Manchester United are not playing European football. United can't just splash the cash, break the bank, pay them what they want, whatever term you're going to use. And the other factor is the targets who Manchester United want, well, they tend to be very, very good footballers, and their clubs have got absolutely no inclination of selling them mid-season, and nor do they need to. Most Premier League clubs are financially very strong now, so they don't need to sell the best players mid-season. Then there are other side factors. Laurie's touched on some of them. Because of a lack of games, that led into it as well. If Manchester United was still in the FA Cup, still in the League Cup, that would have been more games, which means more players. But if you're going from a 60-game season to a 40-game season, you need fewer of everything. Players, support staff at the club. It is a considerably different season to last season. I was always told that any movement would be based on outgoings, and at the same time, we're not in the habit of letting footballers leave for free. So there was interest, for example, in Joshua Zirkzee from AS Roma. But a lot of these clubs think it's Moneybags United. We can take the players, we can give them like 15 quid a week, and, we get a top-class player. Manchester United were not entertaining any of that at all, because Manchester United may need those players.
Is it a gamble, Carl, that United have taken this approach? Because I guess it's been difficult to work out a bit more than usual, because you started the month with one manager, you've ended it with another. By the summer, there could be another Manchester United manager as well. Obviously, you had Darren Fletcher in the middle of all that too. So I guess the clarity in the sort of head coach manager's opinion wasn't there. Clearly, the club is being run a different way now, and the hierarchy's opinion is more important than it's been for a long time, I think. But is this the right thing, considering United are now in a battle for the Champions League, and it would make a huge difference for the short-term future if they were able to make it?
It feels like a calculated gamble. It seems understandable. There aren't, to my mind, there aren't too many players out there in the January market who are available to hit the ground running for Manchester United and Manchester United's objective, which now is Champions League football, not European football. And it doesn't seem like United have the sort of money to really push the boat out for some of the better players. Look, this was a relatively quiet January transfer window, not just for United, but for most clubs. I think it was 33 senior team signings at Premier League clubs. And some of the big moves didn't happen. Mateta didn't go to AC Milan due to a knee injury. Dwight McNeil didn't move either. Making business in January is hard, and it's even hard to do that when you don't have a permanent first team manager, and when you only have, I think it's now 14 games left, 15 games. Critchley can correct me here.
14.
14 games
Quick
left.
maths.
Thank you very much. When it's only 14 games left, you have enough. I think you have enough bodies in the United squad to deal with this. It's the question of quality. This is me now tapping on wood to make sure Casemiro doesn't get injured.
Anyone else you're concerned about, or just Casemiro?
Casemiro in particular. I think, in theory, Bruno Fernandes doesn't get injured.
Well, he did.
He's already got his
I saw him get injured at Aston Villa, but although he did recover from it miraculously quickly, so I don't know if it really counts as a proper injury or not. That's Bruno. We'll talk about him and his future a little bit later, actually. Critch, if there's an area of the team that will concern Michael Carrick in these remaining 14 matches of the campaign, mad saying that at the start of February, isn't it? But that's been established already, maybe. If there is an area, is it that midfield that is the concern, or is it elsewhere?
I think it has to be midfield primarily. I think that this is the right approach and the right strategy that the club have gone with instinctively. I feel that. But I'm also conscious that if there is 2 or 3 injuries to those 4 players that 3 players really that they've got in central midfield, then we'll be saying very different things about the strategy going into this transfer window. Even if there's just one, people will start to get the jitters, won't they? And I don't like to hinge a whole judgment on the transfer window as to whether or not you should have loaned out Toby Collier, but I feel like it would have been useful if you're not going to make the short-term signing find an option a body that will just fill a hole for the rest of the season, then I would have liked to keep enough bodies around who have at least got some experience at first team level and be able to come in, step in and fill that hole. So I question that slightly, but then I think there's a bigger picture here. The club has been burnt in the past by looking too short term. We've asked for years for them to take more of a considered strategy, more of a, considered approach to the market. And that isn't always the easiest thing to do. It requires some discipline. It requires actually making some tough decisions or saying that we're not going to go after this player because we don't want them around the squad later down the line when we don't necessarily need them. I think that approach, it comes with some pain, but there's long-term gain in it, hopefully. And it's a calculated risk, but a risk that, you hope will turn out right. So I think it's the right decision. I look at midfield and I worry slightly. Other positions, I feel like the left-hand side at the minute has struggled a little bit just simply because Dorgu's out and there's a bit of a question mark over what the configuration is there, what different attributes different players bring in those positions. I think Cunha, look, we've all loved Matheus Cunha, particularly over the last few games when he started scoring a few goals as well, and the little dance, but he's a very different player to Dorgu in that position, not quite the same physical thrust, I would say, and so a bit more technical, and maybe that suits different games and different opponents compared to others. But I think the real pressure point is midfield, and the approach in the window will be judged on whether they can get through the next few months with that midfield in place as it is right now.
The midfield is stronger at the end of the window than it was at the start of the window for one reason. Kobbie Mainoo has stayed. Kobbie Mainoo wanted to leave Manchester United to play on loan, to get minutes, which is an entirely reasonable request from his part. And the change in coach meant that he changed his decision and was brought straight back in, and is now a starter for Manchester United. And I don't know a United fan who's not delighted that. He's just plugged himself back in and he's playing all the time. So he has boosted the midfield.
Yeah, it does look better, like we've spoken about. I suppose the left-hand side is a question mark, Critch, which you mentioned before. And Antoine Semenyo, we understand Ruben Amorim saw as a solution for Manchester United on that left-hand side. So how close did United come in the end, Andy, do you think, to getting Antoine Semenyo?
United wanted him, and at times, United put the pitch in. Why did he move to Manchester City? I suspect it was for money. He might say that he felt like there was a more realistic chance of, losing 2-3-0 in the Manchester derby, and he wanted to play at Old Trafford and be on a losing team. I might be sounding slightly facetious here. He's a very good player, and I think it illustrates Manchester United's falling stock in that you couldn't say to him, we're in the Champions League. This is another reason why Manchester United have got to get back into Europe, to get out of this weird season that we're in. I think they liked him for the reasons that we discussed, his versatility, and that was someone United would have gone for because there was a fixed fee there. And money is tight, it absolutely is. And if United don't get into Europe, it will be even tighter next season. That's why it's imperative that United get into Europe. We touched on Dorgu a little bit. So if we wind back a year, loads of clubs wanted Patrick Dorgu. None of them had the money. They all wanted to wait until the summer. And Manchester United said, we'll do it now, and did it now. And I think that transfer deserves some credit. So missing him is a blow because he's become an important player, but he will come back. And because we play once every 6 months, he's only going to miss like a game or two, isn't he? And hopefully he can finish the season as strongly. But your general point, Ian, about injuries is absolutely spot on. United need a fair wind with injuries. But I think the club have got through AFCON, which hit the club harder than other clubs. Got through losing a key player at that point, Bruno Fernandes, and need a fair wind. If you're losing a Casemiro, if you're losing a Bruno or an Mbumo, some of those key players, United will suffer. But let's be more optimistic. Fernandes is back and playing. Harry Maguire is back and playing. The lads are back from AFCON. Bruno's back. Šeško's available to play. It's a pretty healthy looking bench at the moment, and it wasn't at the start of this month. So that's me with the optimistic side. You're up against teams who've got bigger squads, who've got higher wage bills now because Manchester United have slipped and are not playing European football or the Champions League extras. But, and it's a huge but, United have got a week to prepare for most games. Loads of them clubs have got European football. So there are advantages to United. United are fourth. I would have settled for that all day long. I would have settled for 6 this season at the start of the season and Europa League. So as we speak, United are punching above the target, which is to get back into Europe.
Yeah, injuries, Carl, is a question. You were knocking on wood, obviously, a moment ago. Andy sort of added to it there. Nick asked the question. He said, Amarin's system, in his opinion, had many flaws, but one thing he really nailed was fitness. Players generally stayed healthy and were available for long stretches. That was certainly an issue under Erik ten Hag. From the small sample size we've seen with Carrick, it looks more dynamic. There's more sprinting, more pressing, attacking, counter-attacking, which is brilliant to watch. But he says, I'm really hoping Dorgu's hamstring isn't an early sign of the squad struggling physically with the change in intensity. Is that a concern?
Kind of. In that, I can't really give you an answer till we get to the end of the season. We have to look at how many soft tissue injuries that have happened in there. Look, there are some seasons where it feels like it's all going wrong and it feels like players are just running far too much space. And I think that was very apparent in Erik ten Hag's final full season, where you had a front press that wasn't really working well, a bunch of centre-backs that were camped on their own box and midfielders going up and down and eventually getting hamstring injuries. That doesn't feel the case this season. I didn't go on pre-season tour, but it did sound like, and Andy will be able to verify or vouch for this, it did feel like they were trying to improve the fitness there and get the squad to the fitness levels Amarin wanted for his form of football. And then what we've heard since is some of the training ground sessions right now under Carrick, Holland, Woodgate.
Travis Binion.
Thank you very much.
Johnny Evans.
Thank you very much. It sounds
Charlie
like those
Owen's
training.
still there. Yeah.
Sounds like those training sessions are shorter and more intense. So it's about burst and it's about protecting some space. If I'm looking at the way United are playing, particularly out of possession, it's less about pressing high up the field, to my opinion. They still do in phases, and more about, if you are going to be very, very intense, it's about making sure you bust the gut to track back and get into that shape as well. So a different kind of intensity. I'm not worried about the way United are playing and how that might lead to injuries in the same way than I did in Ten Hag's final full season, or in the same way that I look at other Premier League teams and go, you're asking a lot from your fullbacks here.
I think you've touched on a really interesting point here, which is lack of injuries. I'm told that Sam Erith, for example, is doing well, and that the performance, the medical area is doing well too. And I can remember, I forget the specifics of the date, but there were 2 injuries picked up in a very short period of time. I'm going back a year. You might jog my memory a little bit. And somebody just said to me, you need to look into this. Why is this happening? So there's been so many changes behind the scenes at Manchester United, the team behind the team, if you like. But I am hearing a lot more positives than negatives. I just am. And if people were coming to me going, this is wrong, that's going on, I'd be right onto it. So if fewer injuries is a mark of where Manchester United are going towards, then I would welcome that as well.
Yeah, it was that disastrous day, wasn't it, of training where Ahmad got injured,
Oh,
Kobe
my
Mainoo
goodness.
got injured,
Yes.
Mason Mount as well, maybe. I feel like there was 3 injuries, possibly all.
Ugarte, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Didn't the whole midfield get wiped out, and that's why
Was
all
it
the kids are on the
Ugarte?
bench
Yeah.
at Tottenham.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember it being an absolute disaster, basically.
It's really hard to cover injuries like that because it's so subjective, innit? You're basically accusing people of unprofessionalism or dereliction of duties, which you can't do. All you get
And there's
is
a privacy as well, isn't there?
yeah. This has happened. Oh no. But you can't really push beyond it because for the issues that you've mentioned, I'm just glad that it seems not to be happening as much.
Yeah, it feels as if the controllables are getting better controlled. Look, there are some injuries that you cannot legislate for. I don't think anyone would have predicted what happened to Lisandro Martinez in the game against West Ham, where Kufal just fell on top of him and he injured his knee. Or you catch yourself in an awkward moment in the same way Rafael Varane did once in the 22-23 season, and he was out for several weeks too. So the soft tissue injuries, the things to do with your hamstrings and those sorts of muscles, those injuries don't seem to be occurring as much, and that is to be applauded. And then you've got to start knocking on wood, getting your 4-leaf clovers out, and making sure that when certain players jump up in the air to contest aerial drills, no one's swinging an elbow, you know?
Yeah, we'll do all those things, cross fingers, the lot. Let's hope that there's no major injuries between now and the end of the season. Let's talk about some of the deals that were done then for Manchester United. Not major ones, but still lots going on for the youth team players in particular and some of the players on the fringes of the first team too. So Toby Collier back out on loan to Hull. Harry Maguire back out on loan to Norwich, although he's only managed 15 minutes for them so far on his debut and then been injured in training. I think it's been said that it's a serious injury. We're waiting for more details on it, but that's a real blow for him. There's also Ethan Wheatley, who's gone to Bradford, Gabriel Bianchieri, who's gone to Rotherham, Jacob Devaney at St Mirren, James Scanlon at Swindon, Sekou Kone, who's at Swiss side Lausanne. I think I'm right in Lausanne. Thank you, Critch, our resident French expert. It's Switzerland, but it's in this French-speaking part, I think.
You got it.
But that's certainly one to keep an eye on as well. I mean, he's had a horrendous head injury this season, the type of thing you can't legislate for, like Carl mentioned before. So hopefully he gets some minutes in the second half of this season and can push towards being an option in Manchester United's midfield for next year. Also, 3 permanent deals done as well. Joe Hugill gone to Kilmarnock, Reece Bennett to Fleetwood, and Sam Mather gone to Kayserispor in Turkey. So who's had an eye across this? Critch, you put your hand up before. What do you make of these deals? Who have you got an eye on, and what stands out to you from them?
Well, I think I've liked James Scanlon as a player. Gibraltar international. People may or may not know, but given that he's such a small population, he was called up I think 2 years ago now, and he'd already made his first cap when he was still with the under-18s. 19-year-old winger, done well for the 21s when he's played this season. I think he was just clearly somebody who's ready to make that step into senior men's football, whatever level it's at. I think there's quite a bit of interest in him from clubs, EFL around Europe as well, but preferred Swindon's gone there. See how he gets on. It's going to be interesting, certainly being in the dressing room with Ian Holloway. I know he's been back in the news recently as well. So I look forward to that's definitely going to be a learning curve for James Scanlon. I think you're right about Sekou Kone. It's been a really difficult year for him. He had that, I think he fractured an eye socket in a National League Cup game at Tamworth back in August, and that meant that the game was abandoned. It was that bad an injury, and he's taken a while to come back. Obviously, I think there was big hopes for him when he joined. It was interesting to see United make that kind of signing, relatively unknown. He was still playing in Mali at the time, and he's a midfielder there's clearly ability there, but I think again, another player who's just ready to really test themselves in senior football and get the experience that is so necessary for these players for that. So be good to see how he gets on as well. And yeah, look, I said before, Toby Collier, I maybe would have kept him around given the issues with midfield and the lack of depth and how thin it looks like it could be. But he didn't have a great first loan spell at West Brom this year, getting injured there as well and frustrated, and he obviously will want game time, so I can understand it from that perspective. Harry Maguire is really disappointing that we're still waiting to find out more information about it, but if that is a serious injury, because we all know how well he was playing for Sheffield Wednesday before that, and he's earned himself, I know Norwich has been struggling as well, but he's earned himself a move a few places further up in the Championship, and we were looking forward to seeing how he gets on. I think they're good moves. United tend to do this in January. They will bring players back in who've been out on loan in the first half, and then others that haven't been will go out and will try and get these minutes against proper senior football to really test them. And it's a method and an approach that I think is varied and works and keeps the connection to the club, but at the same time gives them the experience that they need.
I'd echo a lot of that. Critch, I think Collier's probably the highest profile of them. So he's gone to Hull City, who are doing really well in the Championship. I know he wasn't featuring a lot for West Brom, now managed by Eric Ramsey, who's a coach at Manchester United, not doing well at the moment. Collier will be in safe hands, partly because the assistant manager at Hull City is a massive Manchester United fan, Dean Alden. So there'd be no issues there. This is Dean Alden, who comes and watches Manchester United play as a fan when Hull City are not playing. Not someone who watches them on telly. He comes to the game. He was at the game at the weekend against Fulham. Amas, we don't know what's going to go on with the injury there, but if he's in a Norwich team fighting relegation, that is far better than a Sheffield Wednesday team who've been relegated because the points gap is so big. And that Sheffield Wednesday team, I've spoken to a couple of people who watch them all the time. There's a mishmash there of talent levels. Norwich City are struggling, they're disappointing, but they are a Championship team. They are picking up points in the Championship. So that could be better from them. From United's perspective, the club need loan players to be playing. They're not in the business of loaning them out to see them sit on a bench, because that doesn't really help their development. That said, there is such a thing as a bad loan, which can be a good thing. And I've used this example before. When Ahmad went to Rangers, he wasn't picked, and the players can get a dose of the unfortunate side of football. What it's like not to be the star, what it's like to having the manager not really rating you. And then you can have a good loan. Ahmad at Sunderland was absolutely fantastic. So you've got a lot of balance. I think overall Manchester United need to get better at selling fringe players. And you're looking at some of these players where they've gone to. So Joe Hugill, for example, for a time there were quite high hopes for him as a young striker scoring a lot of goals. He's not going to make it at Manchester United. There's no shame in that. So he goes to Kilmarnock on a permanent deal. He plays in the SPL. Best case for someone like him is that he scores loads of goals and he works his way back up. That is also possible. I wish all the lads who've gone out on loan well.
Yeah, we echo that. Tyler Fredrickson maybe was another player who was being lined up for a loan. There was interest from Scotland in him, but he picked up an injury while still at United, so he'll remain now for the remainder of this season. Another player who's been on the sort of cusp of breaking into the first team picture. The summer promises to be different. We've outlined on Talk to the Devils previously exactly what Manchester United are after. The main thing, Andy, we've talked about is wanting two central midfielders. Certainly one, potentially two. How do you see it now? Because with the formation change, does that change United's transfer strategy?
Well, it depends who leaves as well, Ian. If we know that Casemiro's going. I've been told the priority is the number 6, absolutely so. But say, for example, Bruno Fernandes was to leave, and I've got no evidence that he is going to leave. That alters things. So it's all in play, as is where Manchester United will be playing next season. If you're playing Champions League, you need a bigger squad. You need more. Money's got to go into the squad. You're playing the Europa League, you need a bigger squad as well. We don't know what's going to happen with players in certain positions. I've said Bruno. Harry Maguire is another one. You'd be looking at Josh Zirkzee and Manu Ugarte, who plays in that midfield, and you'd be thinking that his Manchester United future isn't looking the best right now. Situations can change, as we've seen with Cobby, but and we don't know who the new manager is going to be. If it's Michael Carrick, if it's somebody else. So I think that United's, the way the club is modelled now is not as big as issue as it was in the past, where the manager chooses the signings. The club chooses the signings now. And clearly there's talk with the coaches. So I'll use the Dorgu example again. Jason Wilcox, Ruben Amorim, they find agreement on the player. They both speak to the player. They convince him to come and say, this is where you're going to play. But he was a player who was partially signed for the system, but I would say he was also partially signed for the club, knowing that he could be versatile. And ironically, he's playing his best football in the non-Amorim system. So I'm pretty comfortable about things. I think the finances are really important. And I'm also pretty encouraged by the recruitment under Ineos. I think that the signings who have come in have largely been positive ones, and we're seeing that in an upturn in league form. But it's absolutely, you want that Brian Robson type, Roy Keane type, Paul Ince type central midfielder. And we've talked about who they might be. I know Manchester City will probably try and sign Manchester United's first 5 targets and probably sign them all for like 32 quid each. But Manchester United should get one of them. Still going to be attractive to join Manchester United and play in the centre of midfield.
Yeah, Critch, the 3 targets, the 3 names that we've mentioned, Laurie mentioned them in his video at the very start of this as well. Elliot Anderson, Carlos Baleba, Adam Wharton. Do you think they will still be the primary targets, or can you see other names coming into the frame come the summer?
I think other names come into the frame if those names aren't available. Andy's completely right that there's going to be a lot of competition for those players, simply because they are young, super talented, Premier League proven midfielders. And it's a position that not just United are looking at, other clubs around the league, City especially, but there's going to be fierce competition for these players. I think Elliot Anderson is United's first choice at this stage, has been for a while. I think he's my first choice as well. I'm sick of all these bandwagon jumpers who've just got on since he started playing for England and think he's the bee's knees. When I was watching him last, I was like, no, they need to get Elliot Anderson. Nobody was talking about him then, just a point that I'd like to make. But Elliot Anderson, I think, first choice. Carlos Baleba, we know that interest was there last summer as well. United made that approach. It would be interesting to see whether they could do both. I think that both will be quite expensive, and we know that United's situation in terms of the finances. I think, to be honest, even if they were to get Champions League, I don't think it's a panacea. I don't think it solves all the problems, and I think you still have to go into next season with Champions League football being conscious that you've got a big rebuild to do, particularly in midfield, but you've got to be, you can't just spend willy-nilly like they have done in the past, and because you're still taking risks with these deals. We've seen Baleba this season hasn't perhaps hit the form that he did last. And so what level of player you get in there, it's a bit of an open question. I think other names could surface. We've seen links to people like James Garner before, but then he's just signed a new contract at Everton. You've heard João Gomez's name being mentioned. I think that was played down a little bit to us last time we checked it out. But look, these players still fit the mould. They're number 6s. They're young-ish. They have Premier League experience. That's certainly the profile that United have been looking at in this position. But there's no doubt that those 3 that we mentioned are the 3 main targets, and we'll see if United manage to snare one.
Yeah, I totally agree with Critch. It is interesting now that if it looks like Mainoo's being reintegrated and is going to be a more consistent first-team player, you are going to need to buy, or at least have in your thinking, how is the number 6 or how is your top midfielder going to pair with Mainoo? And then, because I think that's going to be certainly different. One big thing when I do my sort of shopping for Amin or shopping for Ten Hag I have no idea who we're shopping for next time in the summer. But when I get round to doing that and working with a data team, I'm definitely going to have one of the big bullet points is height and set piece.
Definitely.
Because if you're playing with Mainoo has improved in his defensive ability, but he's not necessarily that sort of aerially dominant football player, and you want someone next to him who can do that. I think there are times when I'm looking at Aston Villa when they have their midfielders fit, and I'm going, Amadou Onana would have been a complementary player for Mainoo, perhaps more so than someone like Manu Ugarte. Ugarte's situation is going to be really interesting this summer too, because if he's retained, does that mean United necessarily have the bandwidth to go out and get a second midfielder? Is that second midfielder going to be Ugarte? Or if you indeed move Ugarte, do you get a sort of 50 million price tag, sort of more budget option? Or do you push for those 2 big midfielders there too? 2 big midfielders there too? I'm losing my head here.
Makes
midfield
sense to me.
It's complicated. And indeed, there is the Bruno Fernandes question mark. So there is a point in time where this Manchester United team this Man United team between now and the end of the season is mostly going to be powered by Lisandro Martinez, Casemiro, Bruno Fernandes, to my mind. And there is a pretty good chance that in the summer, after all the movement, it's going to be powered by Lisandro Martinez, new midfielder, plus Mainoo, and then possibly even other midfielder who isn't Bruno Fernandes, or indeed Do you move mainly forward, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So trying to figure all of this out in a couple of weeks at a time where Critchley's completely correct. I think Manchester City and Liverpool will also be looking at these. I think Manchester City and Liverpool will also be looking at these three players. I think if you're a team like Tottenham Hotspur, you're going to be looking to get a more dynamic number 8 / backup to James Maddison as well. I think if you're Newcastle, you're probably looking at your midfield and also trying to wonder who that person is to try to sell Sandro Tonali to Arsenal too. So a lot of movement from a lot of clubs who are in and around the Champions League places. Good luck to Jason Wilcox. He's got to start swinging elbows and making some real good pitches.
Just quickly, Carl, John has asked about Hayden Hackney, who, of course, Michael Carrick worked with at Middlesbrough. Is he someone that would be worth a punt, is what John's asking in the summer?
He came out well when I did my last shopping for Ammer and Peace for central midfield. He came out well as what I described as one of Michael Carrick's nephews, and definitely seemed like a football player who had paid attention to Michael Carrick's tutelage. And there were times at Middlesbrough, at least under Carrick, he was very good at playing the pass before the pass. So sort of the pass into the fullback or to the wide player before that player could then deliver the cross that would get a goal. One thing that has become more obvious to me in the last couple of seasons, and also since talking to more Middlesbrough fans or people who watch Middlesbrough a lot more in more recent seasons, is Hackney's perhaps not the best defensively minded. He can glitch and switch off when his team is out of possession. So if you can work on that, absolutely. I think he has the potential to be a top half Premier League player. At this point in time, I think he's good enough to play in the Premier League, but perhaps for clubs that are closer to 12th rather than where Manchester United are right now in this moment. But yeah, definitely someone to have a look at. Definitely a football player has a bright future ahead of him.
United have got other targets as well. You know, they don't make everything public. They keep the cards close to the chest. Some of it gets out, some of it doesn't. I see a lot of erroneous reporting as well from agents who want their clients to be linked to Manchester United. They looked at a lad in Italy, and the names we've talked about are absolutely been targets for Manchester United. The thing with Anderson, be quite interesting if Carrick plays any part of this, because they both played for Wallsend Boys Club, and you've got to sell your vision to a player. So what Manchester United could have is Michael Carrick, and then you could have Mark Critchley saying that I was watching you when you were 2 playing for Wallsend Boys Club.
Of course, it's difficult as well because it's becoming more and more challenging week by week to replace Casemiro. We talked about it on the last show. Carl, you outlined beautifully how he has become this multifaceted aspect to Manchester United's midfield. His performance level is back to as good as he's played, I think, in his time in England. And there's some interesting stats, Critch, isn't there, about just how important he is to this Manchester United team this season?
Yeah, I think people picked this up after the game the other day where he comes off and Ugarte goes on. I think it's now United conceded 2 once he was off the pitch, and they've now conceded more Premier League goals with Ugarte on the pitch this season than when Casemiro's been on the pitch this season. That's despite the fact that Casemiro's played almost double the minutes of Ugarte. Now, I almost don't like to single Ugarte out like that, because football's a very complex game. You know, you see these sort of with or without stats in other sports, a lot of American sports actually, when it might be basketball where there's 6 players on the court at one time, and so the difference is 6. Is there 6 or 5? I don't know. See, this shows what I know about basketball. But
I thought you meant for both teams. I've got absolutely no idea. So,
okay. There's not as many players as in a football match. Is that an accurate statement? I think that's an accurate statement.
Yeah, it's a starting 5, brother.
Starting 5, got you. So, there's more variance, I suppose, and there's more, more things can go wrong in an 11-a-side game. But it's telling, and I think people have started to notice this over the last few weeks, that when Casemiro's not on the pitch, we can say that certainly United don't look as solid a team. I think, Carl, you had the stat before that they've conceded a goal every 86 minutes when he's on the pitch and every 34 minutes when he's off. So we know that he is one of the best holding midfielders of his generation. That's why United signed him. It's why they paid him so much money. That's why they paid a lot of money for a guy that was over 30. It was for him to have this impact. He has had that impact, I would say, pretty consistently over the last 3.5 years since he's been in Manchester. And we've seen him have different impacts as well further up the pitch. So it's really, I still think there's games where he looks slightly exposed. I still think if he has to cover a lot of ground, then he's not always at his best. But United have sort of limited that both under Amorim before and now under Carrick, where that hasn't really been exposed. And so we're seeing the absolute best of Casemiro. And the goals are another thing. Like all the players that we're talking about here, Anderson, Baleba, Wharton, whoever, I don't know if they've still got that threat from set pieces or that instinct to be where they need to be in the box. There's actually a great story about Casemiro that like basically every player, he used to be a striker when he was a kid, but he was going for trials at Sao Paulo's academy, and there was like 300 kids there and they were only going to accept 50. And so the coach asked this group of kids, who's a striker? And Casemiro sees about 50 kids put their hand up. And then the coach asks, who's a number 10? And he sees another 50 kids put their hand up. So he keeps his hand down for the whole thing. And they say, who's a holding midfielder? And he puts his hand up and there's only 7 or 8 others. And that's how he gets into the academy. So he knows he's even when he was a kid, he had this instinct of what he needs to do, where he needs to be to succeed. And I think we've seen that throughout his career at Old Trafford over the last couple of years. And that is going to be a huge miss. And it's something that, for all the hype and all the attention that's been around young, very talented Premier League midfielders, there's going to be a gap there that they need to fill.
Andy, the other area the other two areas actually where there's been talk, we mentioned left wing before, there's also centre-back, which we've talked about on the podcast previously. Now, obviously, Harry Maguire's future is up in the air with him being out of contract at the end of the season. His form recently suggests that maybe there is a future beyond the end of this campaign for him still at the club. So are they the other areas where you expect United will have a look in the summer?
Yeah, I've said the word defensive leader several times. That's what Manchester United want. Who is that person? Can that person wait? Because there are other areas which need more care and attention, such as the midfield. I did a detailed article about Harry Maguire's situation last week on The Athletic. Have a read of it. As we speak, United have not spoken and offered an extension to the contract. Harry Maguire likes his time. Likes living in Manchester, comes out in a rash when he goes like 30 miles away, all that sort of stuff. Playing well, man, in a match against Arsenal, but one of the top earning players. So I suspect there needs to be compromise in terms of his wage. I think looking at the comments to that article, the vast majority of United fans would be quite happy if he stayed around for several reasons, influencing the dressing room as well as what he does on the pitch as well.
Okay, there's 2 huge names that we still need to mention in the remainder of this podcast. They are Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford. Let's talk about Bruno Fernandes first, if we can. Owen sets it out lovely. Surely we can't let Bruno go, is the question that he asks. There's obviously doubt about his future, Critch. There was a lot of doubt about his future in the summer. He's since given interviews where he's explained a little bit more the situation from his perspective. And he said that he felt that people at the club, important people at the club, would have been happy for him to go. It was actually Ruben Amorim, it sounded like, and his family in the end, which convinced Bruno Fernandes to stay at Manchester United. He's only really underlined his importance to the team this season. Some of the data, despite the fact that he's not played as a number 10 the entire campaign, is so impressive. He's leading the way in the Premier League for assists for set pieces, chances created in open play, big chances created through balls. All the creative data you need to look at, Bruno Fernandes is the best. In fact, across Europe's top 5 leagues, there's only Michael Olise who's got more assists than him. And obviously he's playing in a completely different league, a completely different team. And now he's on the cusp of history once again, Bruno Fernandes, because he's 1 assist away from 100 assists and 100 goals for United. I don't know how far these records go back in terms of being recorded, but officially recorded, there's only Ryan Giggs and Wayne Rooney who have done that before Bruno. So his importance is unquestioned. It's his future that's the question. How do you see it?
I think at the moment he's possibly on form one of the best players in the league, if not the best player in the league. And there was a lot of question marks over United's decision and Bruno's decision, and the fact that neither of them could really bring themselves to part ways last summer, and so ultimately settled on staying and going for another year. And that meant that the club didn't have 80 to 100 million pounds in revenue coming through transfers from Saudi. It meant that Bruno didn't have, I don't know how much they get paid a week over there, but whatever life-changing amounts of money wasn't falling into his bank account either. But I think that given where United are in the league at the moment, given that things are looking up, given that Champions League is a serious prospect, I think you could possibly make the argument that it was worth turning down that money to keep Bruno Fernandes around and have him in this team if United get Champions League football. The question will be, once we reach the summer, whether we do it all over again. I think that as you say, his importance is absolutely unquestioned, and the act of replacing him would simply be something that I don't think any of us can really conceive of. What player comes into this team that is available at the moment that replaces what Bruno Fernandes does? I don't know. I don't have the answer. I'd be amazed if United have the answer. If they do, go and do it. Make a bit of money, get it, but it's not simple. And I think that was one reason why, as I say, the ball, both sides were leaving the ball in each other's court last summer. Bruno said, well, I'll go, but only if you want me to. United said, well, we're not going to stand in your way, but we'd like you to stay. I think that speaks to the real dilemma, and it's a dilemma that hasn't really resolved itself over the years since. At the moment, I'd say it's probably 50-50. I don't know whether he'll stay or go. I think that everything that happened last summer is, in a sense, unresolved, and you pick that up within the interview that he gave to Portuguese media a few weeks ago, and when he spoke to Laurie and a few of the Manchester journalists. It's a real 50-50 at the minute. I'm not sure which way to go, but I think I know now, certainly, which way I would like it to go from a United perspective, and I think Bruno Fernandes is too important to really let him leave this football club.
Yeah, to be fair, Andy, I think since last summer, in a way, it's got a bit more confused because of how open Bruno Fernandes has been about his view of the situation. It's rare to get that sort of insight from a first-person perspective on this sort of transfer, and it's a huge deal, obviously, for Manchester United. It's a huge decision to make for the player and the club about what happens next. Obviously, it was Amorim who had the conversation with Bruno Fernandes that he says helped to convince him to stay. He's not the head coach anymore. We don't know who it will be, like we've said several times on this episode in the summer. And there's also been some detail that's been reported as well about a potential release clause for Bruno Fernandes that's available to foreign clubs, not Premier League clubs, as the report goes, for something like 60 million euros, which feels quite low for him when we've looked at 100 million pounds, which was the potential fee going around for a move to Saudi Arabia, maybe before that release clause actually came into effect. So it's only got a bit more confusing in some ways, hasn't it?
Yeah. Critch spoke a lot of sense there. I think him staying in the Premier League absolutely helps him for Portugal ahead of the World Cup finals. He is Manchester United's best player right now, and was last season as well. He's 31. Is he going to be at the club when he's 34, 35, 36? Probably not. At what point do you let him go? He's one of the top earners. He absolutely justifies it. He's hardly ever injured. He's a leader. He's a captain. He's the main man. United fans love him. It's one of them Fergie decisions is needed, where you probably make an unpopular decision because you can see what's coming in terms of future talent. It's a really, really difficult one. And also, we don't know what Bruno's perspective is. So I've said he's one of the top earners in world football. He is, but we saw the amounts of income tax that footballers pay published this week. And several of them, including him, are in the top 100 income tax payers in the United Kingdom, paying huge amounts, tens of millions. If he was to move to Saudi Arabia, for example, he wouldn't have to do that. So I'm not privy to how he feels financially. It's a question that's just going to keep coming, isn't it? Do you let him go when you can get money for him? And if you have that money, what do you then do with that money? I've just outlined it there. He's currently Manchester United's best player, and without him, the team are significantly weaker. I'd like him to stay, but part of me saying that is my emotion, thinking that not only is he the best player now, he's been the best post-Ferguson signing by a distance.
Yeah, he's been the most important player almost since the second he arrived in Manchester, hasn't he? He's the captain, he's the creative force. It feels like at times he's the biggest goal-scoring threat as well, although there's lots more in this Manchester United team now, which is part of the reason why this season so far has been better than last. But yeah, it's a big question. We'll talk about it more, I'm sure, between now and the end of the season to understand exactly what the future is for Manchester United and Bruno Fernandes. Another player, Carl, another high-profile one with a question mark remaining over his Manchester United future is Marcus Rashford. Because I don't think it's as simple to say, looking at the situation, that his Manchester United career is over yet, is it? Because Michael Carrick coming in, there's been reports again about his opinion of the situation. Where are we at with this? What happens next for Marcus Rashford, in your opinion?
What happens next is there's probably going to be some sort of bidding war over him. He's played well in his time at Barcelona. He's more of a substitute than a starting player, but he's got 10 goals now. He was quite impressive in the league phase for them too. He seems to have acclimatized well to life in Barcelona too. Now, we've heard reports from Spanish newspapers and Spanish press that Barcelona would like to keep him. Now, this is the tricky bit. When Barcelona publicly start saying they like to keep a player, that tends to be with a nudge, nudge, wink, wink asterisk on a cheaper deal if possible, please. Now, as Andy has said, Marcus Rashford is similar to Bruno Fernandes. He's one of the highest paid football players in the Premier League, one of the highest paid football players in Manchester United, which also means he's one of the highest paid football players in the world. I think it's a yearly wage of somewhere around 20 million, which Barcelona probably can't afford, especially in a summer where Lewandowski's contract is expiring and they're also going to be in the market for a very expensive centre forward as well. So Barcelona are making loads of noises positively towards Marcus Rashford. They're probably also trying to talk to Jason Wilcox and saying, is there a way we can do a deal so we don't have to pay all of the amount of money that you would like? And it's got to be up to Wilcox and Ineos and everyone else responsible saying, if you want Marcus Rashford, you have to pay enough money so we can go out and get our players in the summer too. I don't think it's as simple to say Amrin leaving means Marcus Rashford can walk back to open arms at Carrington and everything's going to be hunky-dory, if only because I think towards the end of Marcus Rashford's time, most recent time at Manchester United, it didn't look like he was too happy and it didn't look like the relationship between him and the fan base was too happy too. I was there for his last appearance against Pilsen in the Europa League and he didn't play well and he didn't look like he was enjoying himself. He is enjoying himself at Barcelona. I think the best place for Marcus Rashford to play football right now is somewhere that isn't Manchester United. If he feels different and he believes that Manchester United is his footballing home and he wants to come back, then some big discussions have to be happening there.
Critch, any chance that he plays for United again, in your opinion?
I think that I see why people ask the question, given that Ruben Amorim has now departed. And I think it's a logical thing. It's a question I asked myself when he went. We were writing a piece about his time at United, and that I think the gist of that piece was that, you know, now's the time to say goodbye. You know, it may be sad, but it's the right time for all parties concerned. And I think that sense still is still there, even though Amorim has now departed. I don't think it was just an Amorim-led decision. I think it had the support of the wider hierarchy at the club. I think it probably had support on Rashford's side himself, as Carl has rightly said just there. He needed a change of scenery. He needed a change of environment. He needed to experience something different, leave the club essentially and find himself again. And I think you can say that he's successfully done that at Barcelona. Now, whether it will continue at Barcelona, I think it comes down hugely, as the lads have mentioned, to wages. That is a massive, you know, he is one of United's best played players still. He isn't perhaps starting every week at Barcelona. Does he warrant that sort of wage, especially given all the financial issues that they've had very high profile over the last few years? Are they going to be willing to pay that? What does that mean? Because who will be willing to pay it? I think these are all open questions. And look, ultimately, if they aren't resolved, then it could end up with Marcus Rashford back at Carrington training during the summer. But I would be surprised if there still isn't a motivation and an animus within the club to help him find a new club to play for, because that decision was, I think it went beyond Ruben Amorim, and I think it was reflected on Rashford's side as well, that now was the right time to part ways. And I don't think that necessarily changes in the summer.
Andy, you were on the Athletic FC podcast a couple of weeks ago, 22nd of January, if people want to go and have a look at that episode, talking about Marcus Rashford, the future for him, the opinion of him in Barcelona. How do you see it?
Yeah, listen to that. That's with Paul Balos, who covers Barcelona in Catalonia. I think that he's done well. Barca do want him. I think there has to be a compromise and on Marcus's part as well if he wants that dream move to Barca. His wages. Barcelona are going to likely try to reduce what they pay. This is what they do. They know players want to play for them. They know Marcus Rashford is very happy living in the city, playing for the club, doing well. Little bit still in play because if they win the league, if they win the Champions League, that affects their financial perspective. They're slowly building up the new Camp Nou again. It's going to hold 62,000 probably next month and go up and up and up. So that'll ease the pressure on their cash flow. Before I did that podcast, I spoke to 3 people who are involved on a professional level at FC Barcelona. I just said, tell me your rating out of 10 for Marcus Rashford so far this season. And they all came back with the same answer, 8 out of 10. So he has been a success. He's not the star player. He's not Lamine Yamal. He doesn't need to be. He's making an impact. He started the majority of games, but with a full Barcelona team, he probably wouldn't start. He benefited from injuries to other players earlier on in the season. His assists are good. He's good in Europe. He's got better players around him than he probably had at Manchester United. And I think his race had been run at Old Trafford. I'd be very surprised to see him play for Manchester United again. I'm pleased for him that his move has worked out. Barca fans really like him.
Yeah, okay. All right. Again, I don't think that will be the last time that we talk about Marcus Rashford either, but let's see what the next few months hold for him, for all the players that we've talked about on the show, and for Manchester United as we build up to the summer. Obviously, keep your eyes peeled to The Athletic for the very latest on anything. We've only just closed one transfer window, so let's not get too excited about the next one just yet. But I hope you've enjoyed the episode. Critch, Carl, Andy, thank you for your company. As always, thank you for listening and watching along. And we'll be back before Spurs to preview that game where we hope Manchester United will make it 4 wins in a row. Let's see. Thanks for your company. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching this episode of Talk of the Devils. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you've not done already, like the video, and also get involved in the comments too, and click the bell to make sure that you never miss an episode with myself, Andy Mitten, Carl Anka, and Laurie Whitwell. There's also our social channels at TotD Devils on Instagram, X, and TikTok. Thanks for watching.